What actually makes a cult a cult? Believe it or not, there are 5 hard and fast criteria used by international governments to determine whether or not a group is a cult, and Season 2 of Interview with the Vampire covers all of them. Season 1 of Interview with the Vampire did an amazing job breaking down the phases of an abusive relationship, and Season 2 does almost the same thing with cults. In Interview with the Vampire, the cult in question masquerades as a theater troupe. The Théâtre des Vampires is also called the Paris Coven. At first, the Paris Coven seems like everything young vampire Claudia has always wanted. She's found a community of people, or rather vampires, who understand her and her bloody desires. But as Season 2 progresses, Claudia learns that this community comes with a terrible price. So what exactly is Interview with the Vampire? In 1976, Anne Rice wrote a novel called Interview with the Vampire, which became a hit movie in 1994. Anne went on to write 12 more books, which are known collectively as the Vampire Chronicles, and those have at least a dozen film and TV adaptations. The latest and arguably greatest adaptation is the show Interview with the Vampire on AMC. If you haven't seen the show, here's what you need to get started in Season 2. Louis de Pontdulac and his vampire daughter Claudia are exploring Europe after attempting to murder their maker and Louis's lover, whose name is Lestat. They find themselves in Paris after World War II, and that's really all you need to know. This video contains spoilers for Interview with the Vampire Season 2, and Season 1 for that matter. Now, come and find out how Interview with the Vampire tells you everything you need to know about cults. Episode 2 shows the first phase of joining a cult, indoctrination. This is like the love bombing phase, the razzle-dazzle phase, the Twilight special. At first, Claudia is smitten by the Théâtre des Vampires. They ride through the night on motorcycles, feast on the blood of the bourgeoisie, and sleep in a heap in the basement. They're everything Claudia's always wanted. They seem like a non-stop party, and they understand her lust for blood, something Louis does not. To Claudia, the Paris Coven seems like a dream come true. In the HBO series The Vow, former cult member Mark Vicente says, "Nobody joins a cult. They join a good thing, and then they realize they were..." The first phase of joining a cult is always the most fun part. You might feel as if you've found a piece of yourself that's been missing. In the article, What Makes a Cult, Zoe Heller writes, "The less control we feel we have over our circumstances, the more likely we are to entrust our fates to a higher power." Claudia and Louis have been wandering hopelessly through Europe after World War II. Not exactly an inspiring time for a European vacation. Louis feels devastated and disconnected after his lover's death, and Claudia and Louis both experience a traumatic horror at the end of episode 1. They see a deformed vampire throw herself on a fire. Pretty depressing thing to see. Cults often target people who are fresh off of trauma by speaking the language of healing. It's not an accident that many cults have really warm and fuzzy community-centric language, like the People's Temple, the Manson family, or the Children of God. But once you're hooked, beware. Cults aren't always what they seem. The next phase of joining a cult is also close to the next phase of an abusive relationship: isolation. Cult members will often cut off their friends and family, especially ones that question the cult. This doesn't so much apply to vampires. Vampires kiss their human families goodbye a long time ago, and vampires consider covens their families. It's easy for Claudia to cut ties. Her birth family died in a fire 30 years ago, but joining the coven does strain Claudia's relationship with Louis. Louis refuses to join the Paris Coven, which isn't technically allowed, but his special relationship with the coven's leader Armand gives Louis special privileges. More on that later. For Claudia, the decision to give up her freedom to join the coven is the ultimate display of freedom. That's why joining a cult is such a slippery slope. Members join of their own free will, but once inside, it's often more than they bargained for. It certainly is for Claudia. After indoctrination, the cult makes moves to control every aspect of your life. They want you to interact with the cult every single day. The vampires of the Paris Coven live, work, and eat at the Théâtre des Vampires. The fun workshops and splashy theatrics make theater life look fun at first, but it's worth mentioning that even a creative job at the Théâtre des Vampires is forced labor. This becomes extra apparent when the troupe informs Claudia that she'll be playing a baby for the next 50 years. They also saddle her with the most disgusting of chores, like cleaning out the rat box. Every cult demands some form of tribute, whether it's time, money, commitment, or labor. It's not a coincidence that many cults also operate as multi-level marketing schemes. The Twin Flames Universe and Nexium cults both sold classes and offered coaching certificates, giving members the illusions of careers. Cults want their members to interact with the cult daily. This creates control by making sure members don't have time for other things, like friends or hobbies, which could pull them away from the cult. Many cults of the 1960s and 70s lived on communes. Members worked and lived together on a cult-owned piece of land, and they rarely ever left. This is the goal the Paris Coven achieves, a full-time live-in cult. Living on a commune or working for a cause you believe in for free doesn't necessarily mean you belong to a cult, but it can. To figure out if you are accidentally joining a cult or not, you have to look closely at how this community operates. All cults have a system of rules or laws, spoken or unspoken, and so does the Paris Coven. The Paris Coven follows 5 quote-unquote sacred vampire laws. Each coven must have its coven leader. The dark gifts must never be given to the crippled, the maimed, or to children. No vampire must commit to writing the history of vampires. No vampire shall ever reveal his true nature to a mortal and let that mortal live. No vampire may ever destroy another vampire, except the Coven Master has the power of life and death over all his flock, and it is his obligation to finally seek the destruction of all who have broken these laws. Well, that's basically all the traits of a cult right there. At least 3 of those bylaws describe someone with ultimate absolute power. We call that the charismatic leader. In the United States, the FBI uses one important criteria to identify cults: a single charismatic leader. That's someone like Charles Manson, Amy Carlson, or Jim Jones. These leaders have personality traits like conviction, persuasiveness, or good public speaking skills that entice people to join their cult. The charismatic leader probably even has a special nickname like Father, Vanguard, or in the Paris Coven's case, Maître, which means master. This is another subliminal way of controlling the way cult members think about the person in charge. They surrender authority every time they say the leader's name. The last 2 episodes of Interview with the Vampire throw everything out of focus, but according to Claudia's journals and Louis' memory, which is what I'm going to be going off of for this video, I'm actually identifying Santiago as the Paris Coven's charismatic leader. Santiago is the definition of charismatic. He's a spellbinding Shakespearean actor, the star of the show, and a natural leader. The leader is technically Armand, but according to Louis' narrative, which is the one I'm going off of, Armand openly resents this role, and the other vampires actually respect and listen to Santiago, who is played deliciously by Ben Daniels. The charismatic leader controls the rules. It's important to note that cults have rules, but they don't hold everyone to the same rules. As we can see right there in the vampire laws, the cult leader is exempt from the thou shalt not kill rule. That's why he can destroy another vampire, and it's forbidden for everyone else. Also, in cults, some members get special treatment. In modern cults, celebrities or other high-profile members often get special privileges so that they make the cult look good in the public. In Interview with the Vampire, Claudia and Louis are the shiny new Americans, and they get special privileges at first. Claudia is an avid journaler, which violates Law 3, no vampire must commit to writing the history of vampires. But Santiago lets Claudia off the hook when he finds out about her journals. This makes Claudia feel special. Now she has a secret with the charismatic leader. But the shine always wears off eventually. In episode 4, Claudia gets her first taste of the dark side of cults. Claudia hates playing a baby, and she doesn't want to do it for 50 years, so she starts rebelling by giving lackluster performances. So they force Claudia to wear her humiliating baby doll costume and makeup full time. This torture is tailor-made for Claudia. She's at this point a 40-year-old woman trapped in a 14-year-old girl's body. Claudia is humiliated. Cults use tactics like public shaming, exile, or forced labor to humiliate rebellious members. Where cults might give the leader a reverent title, they might give disobeyers an embarrassing costume or nickname that makes them doubt their humanity and even believe they deserve their punishment. Humiliation is supposed to keep other cult members in line, but the person experiencing humiliation often suffers deep psychological damage. Sometimes it's enough to get them to leave the cult entirely. In the Twin Flames universe, which operated almost entirely online, public shaming during group Zoom calls caused several members to just log off. Claudia's punishment does not endear her to the Paris Coven. If anything, it makes her even more rebellious. Claudia gets a vampire girlfriend, Madeleine, and tries to leave the cult for good. But her plan has one fatal flaw. The most nefarious and defining trait of a cult is that you can never leave. If you're ever not sure if you joined a cult or not, just try leaving and see what happens. If it's a true cult, they'll make leaving very difficult. At first, it seems like Claudia is allowed to leave the Paris Coven. Claudia and Madeleine plan to run away together, and it seems like they're off the hook for Lestat's murder. And then the veil comes off and the bag goes over the head. Claudia, Madeleine, and Louis are kidnapped and put on a humiliating public trial. This is the end for Claudia. The other vampires use mind control to manipulate the audience. The vampire laws are waved in their faces. They're forbidden to speak for themselves. And in the end, Claudia is publicly executed. Claudia calls it what it is, though. She knows the coven is a cult. At the end of her life, she says it's not a trial, it's a stoning. Any version of justice a cult claims to administer is a sham. The cult leader has the final say. I'd like to tell you death is an extreme measure for leaving a cult, but the truth is there are cults where murders are common. There are also doomsday cults where death is the ultimate goal, but it's more likely that a modern cult will just try to ruin your life. Modern cults use blackmail, debt, lawsuits, harassment, doxing, and even perjury to keep former members financially crippled, unemployable, isolated, and alone. Even if you manage to leave, cults can punish you long after you leave the cult. Financial precariousness is the number one reason people stay in cults, even after they smell fire. That's why you have to be very careful how much money you give a cult. Control is what sets a cult apart from a community. Financial control, moral control, and control over members' time and bodies are all signs of a cult. It's a bitter end for Claudia. She saved herself and Louis from one abusive relationship only to find herself trapped in another. And if the Paris Coven were simply a theater troupe, a family, or just a coven, they would have let Claudia try it out, leave when she wanted, and live her life. But they didn't, because they're a cult. So how do you stop a cult? The most common way to kill a cult is to kill its charismatic leader. And so, after Claudia's death, the Paris Coven does not last long. After Claudia's death and Louis' exile, Louis bides his time, goes crazy, and hatches a plan to take down the Paris Coven once and for all. He torches the theater, decapitates Santiago, and then, I guess, forces Armand into a loveless 70-year marriage. Gotcha! The Paris Coven and its reign of terror are effectively over. The end. If you're watching this, I assume you're not in a cult because you probably don't have time to watch YouTube videos if you are. But if you ever find yourself at a low point in your life, reeling from tragedy, and you're tempted to surrender all control to an organization that seems to have your best interests in mind, remember these signs of a cult: a charismatic leader, daily tribute, sacred vows, conflicting rules, humiliation, entrapment, and control. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something and that it wasn't too dark. I personally vastly preferred season 1 to season 2 of The Interview with the Vampire, mostly because I thought season 2 was insanely dramatic and it felt like being trapped in a loveless marriage. And it wasn't dramatic in the fun ways, and also because I think Sam Reid is Australia's gift to TV, and he's the most mesmerizing actor I've ever seen, and he was barely in season 2. But I want to know what you thought. What did you think of the twist? Do you think the Paris Coven is a cult? Leave your answers in the comments. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and take care, everybody. Cheers. Oh, and P.S. Don't join a cult. Just don't do it. Get a pet instead.